$3 million. That is the approximate cost of a single modern interceptor missile. Now place that figure next to another, a few tens of thousands of dollars, the price of a basic unmanned aerial vehicle, or UAV. In today's conflicts, particularly in the evolving confrontation involving Iran, the United States and Israel, these two numbers are not just statistics. They represent a fundamental imbalance that is quietly redefining how wars are fought, and more importantly, how they are sustained. At first glance, war is often perceived as a contest of firepower, technological superiority, and tactical brilliance. Advanced fighter jets, precision-guided munitions, and layered air defense systems dominate headlines and public imagination. But beneath this surface lies a deeper and far more consequential struggle, the ability of a nation to endure. War, in its most unforgiving form, is not merely a clash of weapons, it is a prolonged test of logistics, industrial capacity, and economic resilience. This reality has become increasingly evident in recent analyses of the tensions between the United States, Israel, and Iran. While the US and Israel undeniably possess overwhelming advantages in air power intelligence integration and missile defense systems, they face a critical constraint that cannot be ignored: the cost of sustaining that superiority over time. During the early stages of escalation, the United States reportedly spent close to $891 million per day on military operations. Within just the first week, total expenditures exceeded $6.2 billion, an amount comparable to the annual GDP of smaller nations. Such figures are not just abstract indicators of military might, they represent tangible pressure on national budgets. Every dollar directed toward warfare is a dollar diverted from infrastructure, healthcare, and domestic development. Over time, this reallocation can reshape not only a nation's economy, but also its political and social stability. This creates a paradox of modern warfare. In June 2025, Iran launched approximately 631 missiles toward Israeli territory, with nearly 500 entering Israeli airspace. The Israel Defense Forces reported an interception rate of around 86%, a remarkable achievement by any standard. However, this success came at a cost. Each interception required the deployment of expensive defensive missiles, rapidly depleting stockpiles that are neither cheap nor easy to replenish. Historically, Israel has faced similar challenges. In previous conflicts, concerns over missile shortages forced the country to rely on emergency resupply from the United States. These episodes highlight a sobering truth: even the most advanced defense systems are not immune to the logic of attrition. The imbalance becomes even more striking when examined at scale. A relatively inexpensive drone can compel the use of an interceptor missile worth many times its value. Multiply this exchange hundreds or even thousands of times, and the financial asymmetry becomes unsustainable. This is not just a tactical issue, it is a strategic vulnerability. Military analysts often emphasize that ammunition shortages have long been a decisive factor in warfare. History is filled with examples where even the most powerful armies were forced to halt offensives or adjust strategies due to depleted supplies. The ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine provides a contemporary illustration. The rate of artillery consumption became so intense that Western nations were compelled to significantly ramp up defense production after decades of reduction. Yet the situation in the Middle East presents an even more complex challenge. Modern weapon systems are not only expensive, but also dependent on intricate supply chains. Producing a single advanced missile requires far more than raw materials like metal and explosives. It involves specialized electronics, sensors, microchips, and rare components that often rely on global manufacturing networks. In wartime conditions, scaling up production is neither quick nor straightforward. This transforms the nature of the conflict. Rather than a short sprint toward decisive victory, it becomes a marathon, one in which endurance rather than speed determines the outcome. Each side must carefully manage its resources, balancing immediate military needs against long-term sustainability. Even for a defense superpower like the United States, these constraints are very real. while political rhetoric has at times suggested the capability to sustain prolonged conflict. Indefinitely, data from strategic research institutions paints a more nuanced picture. Procurement records reveal that in recent years, the US has ordered interceptor missiles in relatively modest quantities, typically in the hundreds, rather than thousands. In peacetime, this level of production is sufficient. In a prolonged high-intensity conflict, it may fall far short of demand. Compounding this issue is the ongoing support for Ukraine. Since the outbreak of war in Eastern Europe, the United States has transferred significant quantities of military equipment, including anti-tank systems like the Javelin air defense missiles, such as the Stinger, and millions of artillery rounds. While these contributions have been strategically important, they have also reduced US stockpiles to levels that may take years to rebuild. At the same time, commitments in the Middle East continue to grow. Supplying interceptor missiles to allies like Israel places additional strain on an already stretched defense industrial base. The challenge is not simply financial, it is structural. Production capacity is tied to specialized contractors and complex manufacturing processes that cannot be easily accelerated. Consider the case of a major defense contractor responsible for producing advanced interceptor systems. Public data suggests that approximately 620 units were delivered over the course of a year. However, in a high-intensity conflict, that number could be expended in a matter of days. To replace such losses, production lines would need to operate continuously for over a year just to catch up with current consumption rates. And even then, effectiveness is never absolute. Interception rates, while high, are not perfect. In scenarios involving large-scale coordinated attacks, even a small percentage of incoming threats penetrating defenses can result in significant damage. This raises a critical question: how long can even the most sophisticated air defense systems withstand sustained high-volume assaults? Both sides of the conflict are acutely aware of these limitations. For the United States and Israel, the challenge lies in maintaining defensive superiority without exhausting resources. For Iran, the strategy is fundamentally different and potentially more disruptive. If the opening has revealed the economic strain behind modern warfare, the next step brings us to the strategic layer where nations no longer seek victory in conventional terms, but instead aim to outlast, outmaneuver, and ultimately exhaust their adversaries. In this domain, Iran's approach offers a compelling case study in asymmetric warfare, where the weaker side does not attempt to match strength with strength, but instead exploits structural vulnerabilities within a more powerful system. To understand this, we must revisit a critical moment. In June of the previous year, the world watched as the United States carried out precision airstrikes targeting Iran's nuclear-related facilities. The response from Tehran was not immediate escalation with its most advanced weapons. Instead, Iran initiated a calculated multi-phase retaliation that lasted for nearly 2 weeks. What stood out was not just the scale of the response, but its sequencing. Rather than deploying high-end ballistic missiles from the outset, Iran began with waves of low-cost, often outdated UAVs and older missile systems. On the surface, this may have appeared inefficient or even primitive. In reality, it was a deliberate and highly strategic choice. The objective was not immediate destruction, but gradual depletion. Each incoming drone, regardless of its individual threat level, forced defensive systems to react. Radar networks had to track multiple targets simultaneously, and air defense units were compelled to engage. Every interception meant the expenditure of valuable high-cost missiles. Over time, this created a mounting burden on the defensive side financially, logistically, and operationally. Only after this initial phase did Iran escalate by introducing more advanced systems, including medium-range missiles with extended reach and significantly higher speeds. By that point, defensive networks were already under pressure, their resources partially depleted, and their operators dealing with sustained operational fatigue. This tactic is often referred to as saturation attack, overwhelming a defense system not necessarily by quality, but by quantity and timing. But Iran's strategy extends beyond direct missile exchanges. One of its most significant advantages lies in its network of regional proxies. Armed groups operating in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen act as force multipliers, capable of launching attacks from multiple directions. This multi-front pressure forces opponents to disperse their defenses, diluting their ability to concentrate force where it matters most. In addition, geography plays a decisive role. Unlike Israel, which has a relatively small and concentrated territory, Iran benefits from vast landmass and complex terrain, including mountainous regions that provide natural protection. This strategic depth makes it extraordinarily difficult to neutralize its military infrastructure. Even sustained air campaigns may only degrade rather than eliminate key capabilities. Iran has leveraged this advantage by investing heavily in underground facilities, missile silos, and decentralized production networks. These systems are designed not just for efficiency, but for survivability. Even under heavy bombardment, portions of the network can continue to function, ensuring that the country retains its ability to respond. Despite international sanctions, Iran has also demonstrated a remarkable ability to sustain its military production. Through a combination of domestic innovation, alternative supply channels, and access to black markets, it has secured critical materials needed for missile and UAV manufacturing. Reports have indicated the acquisition of large quantities of chemical components sufficient to produce hundreds of ballistic weapons, highlighting a level of preparation that cannot be easily dismissed. This creates a profound dilemma for the United States and its allies. On one hand, there is a strategic obligation to protect regional partners and maintain stability. On the other, doing so requires a continuous and costly deployment of resources. The more Iran stretches the conflict across time and geography, the more difficult it becomes for its opponents to maintain focus and efficiency. The challenge is further complicated by the extensive network of U.S. military bases across the Gulf region. While these installations are critical for power projection and regional security, they also represent potential targets. As tensions escalate, defending these assets requires additional layers of protection, further increasing the demand for already strained resources. In recent engagements, air defense systems in the region have reportedly consumed munitions at rates comparable to years of peacetime production within just a matter of days. Some regional partners have even requested urgent resupply of interceptor missiles after experiencing significant depletion. This underscores a key point. Modern warfare is not only fought on battlefields, but also within supply chains and manufacturing timelines. And then there are the hidden costs, the logistical backbone of military operations. Fuel for aircraft and naval vessels, maintenance of advanced equipment, transportation of personnel, and rotation of troops between bases all contribute to the true cost of war. These expenses are often underreported, yet they form a substantial portion of the overall burden. As a result, even if the United States and Israel achieve tactical victories, destroying targets, neutralizing commanders, and disrupting operations, the broader strategic objectives may remain elusive. Dismantling an entire missile program or forcing a regime change is far more complex than winning individual engagements. This is where the fundamental divergence in objectives becomes clear. For the United States and Israel, success is defined in operational terms, reducing threats, disabling capabilities, and ensuring regional security. These are measurable military-focused goals. For Iran, however, the definition of victory is entirely different. It is not about defeating a superior military force in direct confrontation. Instead, it is about survival. As long as the government remains intact, its production capabilities endure, and its strategic posture is preserved, Iran can claim success in its own terms. This philosophy is deeply rooted in the principles of asymmetric warfare. History offers multiple examples of this dynamic. During the Vietnam War, and more recently in Afghanistan, technologically superior forces found themselves unable to achieve decisive, lasting victories against opponents with far fewer resources. In both cases, the weaker side adopted strategies that transformed the conflict into a prolonged, costly stalemate, eventually eroding the political will of the stronger power. Iran appears to be operating within a similar framework. By extending the duration of conflict and increasing its cost, it shifts the burden onto its adversaries. Over time, financial strain, public opinion, and strategic fatigue can become as decisive as any weapon system. This brings us back to the central question: who ultimately prevails in such a conflict? The answer is far from straightforward. Military superiority can deliver immediate advantages, but it does not guarantee endurance. Economic strength provides resilience, but it is not infinite. Strategic ingenuity can offset weaknesses, but it cannot eliminate risk. In prolonged conflicts, the concept of victory itself becomes increasingly ambiguous. Each missile launched, each interception made, and each operation executed carries a cost, not only in financial terms, but in human lives and long-term stability. Entire regions can be reshaped by the cumulative effects of sustained warfare. What emerges then is a sobering realization. In wars defined by attrition, the side that wins may simply be the one that endures the longest. And even that endurance comes at a price that can echo for generations. As missile trails continue to cut across the skies of the Middle East, one truth becomes increasingly clear. Modern warfare is no longer just about who strikes harder, but about who can sustain the fight without breaking. And in that sense, the outcome may depend less on firepower and more on patience, resilience, and the limits of national will. If you found this analysis insightful and want to explore more in-depth breakdowns of global military strategy, consider supporting the channel by sharing this video, leaving your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing to Strategy Scope for future content that goes beyond the headlines and into the mechanics shaping our world.